So Tommy gave me this topic, and I'm not a meat scientist. I'm an animal breeder by training many years ago, and I just sort of fell into doing some of this kind of stuff. About 1991, Texas A&M started a race for elk program. Essentially, what we did is we allowed producers in Texas and some other states to consign 5 head of steers or more. And we fed them with collected feed yard data, carcass data, and economic data. And it was actually sort of twofold. One was to sort of allow producers an opportunity to engage in the feeding side of the beef business. And the second part was to sort of look at some of the different characteristics and allow them to get some idea about carcass quality. And that's sort of where it started. And we ran about 25,000 head of cattle through that program over the years. And then the sort of the natural extension is that the feed yards in South Texas, there were about 30 feed yards at that time, primarily going to one beef processing plant down in Corpus. So if you know anything about Texas, or if you know about where Houston is, you just go along the coast about 200 miles, and that's where Corpus is. And there was a regional plant. That plant at the time was called Santa Gaines Beef Processing Plant. It's now called SDX. It's sort of changed hands. It used to be able to harvest about 1,400 head of cattle, and they worked about 5.5 days. And right now they're running right at about 1,100 head. They changed. They sort of changed their business model. But at one time, they would draw cattle from about 30 different feed yards, from all the way down to the Rio Grande River, down to Brownsville, as far away as almost to Fort Stockton in West Texas, San Angelo, over towards Fort Worth. So that's sort of where we got started doing this kind of thing. And then as we did more of it, we had breed associations or breeders, specific breeders that would say, we're feeding our cattle such and such a feed yard, we do collect our carcass data. So we did that for Santa Gertrudis and Cimbra and Rayford and Beefmaster and Brahman, and some other. We even did some Wagyu cattle at one time. So thought we'd give a little history. I really appreciated Derek talking a little bit about the tobacco settlement, because I often wondered how that worked out. But so I thought we'd sort of visit a little history. Back in the 1970s, I spent about 3 years with the American International Starling Association as their director of recruitment when they were in Houston. And we had a carcass program that was actually feeding carcass information from Charlotte and Cross steers out of the design sire evaluation program that we would create EPDs. That was back when most breed associations were still using EDDs, and Merle and Gilson had designed our program, and we were doing EDDs. But nonetheless, all that carcass data was collected because the USDA at that time, AMS, the Agricultural Marketing Service, had a carcass data tag. And I forget the exact cost of that tag. I think it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2. And you put that tag in the animal's ear and went to the feed yard, and the animal didn't lose it. At the beef processing plant, they would notice that those tags were in their ears, and the federal grader was required to handwrite basically quality grade and yield grade high carcass weight. Sometimes we got some additional information, but essentially that's what we. And it was hard. It's hard to say. I probably got a little better than 50% rate, but I know some people said they didn't ever get any information back. Some people were pretty satisfied. So that's sort of how the program, how carcass data was collected back then. There's some of the information that was, and we talked about some of this in earlier calls, and carcass weight, the ribeye fat thickness, percent kidney intelligence, heart fat, lean and bone maturity, Marblin score, and of course quality grade and yield grade. And the program worked. Obviously, it must have worked because we collected an awful lot, about 10,000 records using that particular program. So almost every breed association collects carcass data, whether it's actual or ultrasound, and maybe sometime very soon some camera data, as was talked about earlier. Most of them standardized slaughter rates from 12 to 24 months. And if you've ever fed cattle, you know that it's not a standardized process. Cattle come in at different weights. We're not even talking about different breeds. But they come in at different weights, they're fed different rations. Some animals get sick, some don't. Some are implanted with this implant, some are implanted with that implant. But nonetheless, we sort of pretend that all this carcass data is sort of come from, you know, one particular program. Would you know that a wean or yearling, there's a difference in those cattle? Yearling cattle can be raised a little bit better. Somebody's got to hang on to them a little bit longer. Breeders, if they're interested in collecting, just have to understand they have to defer their income. You know, we can take those calves off your barn and sell them. There's a shipping cost, which has certainly gone with sky high, processing costs. Some yards, some meat yards charge yardage, you know, sort of like a rental fee for the space in the bunk. Treatment costs, if they get sick, interest, possibly advance. Feeders, if you are engaged in a program, even if you're engaged through a university or extension or somebody that specializes in doing that, you need to work with the feed yard and the meat processor, but they have to understand that you want to collect carcass data. Okay? And so they have to, you have to get a phone call. They have to call and say, hey Joe, we're ready to ship this lot. Or you have to make sure that you have that communication, because lots of times, if they're not understanding that, they just send those cattle. Because, you know, I'm not against feed yards, I feed a lot of cattle, but they're in the business of feeding cattle. And if they can open up a lot, they can put more cattle in, and they can make 35% more on the feed that they're feeding that way. But, and then of course, if you're using, you need to make sure your data collectors know. That those cattle are getting ready to go. And it's sort of the responsibility of the data collector to work with the plant. So, you know, there's a lot of moving parts in this if you want to collect actual carcass data. Cattle need to be uniquely identified. So the previous speaker talked about some cameras that are being used in plants, and that's really great. I think there's still probably some folks that have to be there to, you know, to establish a kill order. And by a kill order, I mean a knock order or whatever you want to call it. But if the cattle come up to be knocked, you know, somebody in shackle, somebody has to be there to write down your tags and brands. And you can use an RFID tag to do that, but you gotta make sure the plant has a reader. Make sure that that animal doesn't actually get shunted out somewhere for trimming, for example. Maybe it's got a bruise, and it gets shunted out of the order. It's already been read, but now it's sort of out of order that it comes back in. So it's important to sort of work with that. The processing plant has to be on board. You know, there's been lots of times when a feed yard calls or a breeder calls and says, Joe, we're going to do this. And I call the plant, this will be thing. Yeah, I've been working with that. Well, I have been working with that plant since probably about 1988 or so. So I had a really good relationship with them, and it was not bad. But what would happen when I go to the panhandle, those plants don't know me. And so they have to develop that relationship. And then the data needs to be transcribed and sent to the owner of the breed association relatively quickly. And we always try to make sure that the breeders understood we need to have enough animals that if the data was actually going to be useful, we need to have enough animals in it to have contemporary groups. So there's some examples of the data collection. I just took a couple of pictures. By the way, all these pictures are mine taken with a cell phone. So I just have an Android. I'm an old guy. I don't have one of those fancy Apple phones. And my wife has those. I just have an Android. This is a couple of carpets that happened to be Brahmins. We were doing a study back in 2018. We took what we took out of the loin end up there that you see, we took about a 1-inch steak that we're doing for Warner Grass or Shear Force. And so what we would do is we would stand right after the knock box and we would write out on a piece of paper the brand or the tag number. Sometimes both, sometimes neither. I can tell you that even the best laid plans often go right. And, we would tag the carcasses at the gut table. I really appreciate the very first talk about heart and lung scores. We didn't spend a lot of time scoring hearts, because we don't have that problem in Texas in particular that I know of, at least in looking at the hearts. But we have probably 30 or 40 years worth of liver scores and lung scores. We don't have a real high incidence of liver abscesses. Our rations are not that hot. That's the first reason. We feed corn, but we feed a lot of grain sorghum. We feed a lot, have a lot of pilot. And so we don't have nearly the liver abscesses. And lung scores, we would have some lung. Our lung score is a little bit different than what you saw listed up here. We scored them from 1 to 5, where 1 was completely clean lung, up to a score of 5, which is the lung that was essentially purple. And basically that's an indication of BRD. But it also gave us an opportunity at the gut table. I'm going to get that term, but at the off-ball table, that's where we would actually tag the carcasses. We would actually put a brisket tag, very similar to what you see on that. And then we would go from there to the wash after evisceration and go into the cooler. We would actually collect carcass data after it came out of the cooler, either before or after grading, in what they call a retail cooler. And so the carcass, when they split it, it's hanging about right here, so it's a little bit easier to see. It's not quite as high, and it's chilled, and typically it's after 36 to 48 hours. But we'd also be able to look for carcass blemishes too. So back in 1990s, when most of the black leg vaccines, the clostridial vaccines, well, in the 80s, we moved them off, we tried to move everything into the neck. We still have a lot of 5-CC product with aluminum hydroxide as a carrier. But we moved it all to the neck, and we tried to make them subcutaneous or at least intramuscular. We saw a lot of neck trim. Now, sometimes in those CDRs we see, and when I mean neck trim, I mean neck trim that would be maybe a whole hand or maybe 2 whole hands or more out of the neck. You say, well, it's only neck meat, it doesn't cost anything. But at that time, those carcasses were worth about $1.20. So it was costing about $1.20 or $2 per head. And so we were able to document some of those kinds of things. Plus, as I said earlier, sometimes the animal's not stuck properly, not examinated properly, not bled out. So when we slice that rib out between the 12th and the 13th rib, we can have some extra blood pressure. We'll get blood splash. Sometimes the ribeye can be damaged. Maybe got stepped on, we got kicked at an early age, and then that's when we get a callous ribeye. And basically, it looks like a connective tissue all throughout. Some people think it's marbling, but it isn't. So you can kind of document those kinds of issues. So that's some of the advantages that I said. Now, there's a couple of folks that do collect carcass data. Ty Lawrence at West Texas A&M. He has the carcass data service there, and he does it for NCBA, he does it for a lot of breed associations. I know that probably some of you have got junior college section team or maybe universities in your particular state. There are many scientists who will collect carcass data for feet. That's perfectly fine. I'm not believing anybody else for that. But it's getting harder and harder to find somebody to do that. And it's not cheap. It's not cheap to do it. I did it for $10 a head. And I can tell you, it was the value of that, but I enjoy it. I like to collect the carcass data. I got to interact with breeders. The plant was like 5 miles from my office. And it was a learning experience for me as well as visiting with the plant. So, just if you're going to do it, this is some of the things to think about. That person that's going to collect it, establishing an accurate kill order. I can tell you that's probably the most important thing. No matter how many times you explain to people that you've got to be able to tag and identify these cattle, they'll send you cattle without tags. Sometimes they'll have brands, And I even get to the point that I would look on the back of the feed yard tag, everybody's got a lot tag, and they would have an individual number, and I would use that because to tie it back to the animal. So what I was doing was well worth more than a 10 bucks a day. Report issues in harvesting, bruises, injection site bruises, trim, liver abscess, long sword, heavy carcass weight, light carcass weight, over 30 months. Right, so that's a big issue, and sometimes it's marked, sometimes it's not. I call it precise data collection, that's what Tommy's upset about. I'll make all kinds of precise too. Okay, but this is precise data collection on the actual carcass, okay? Photograph, this is something that we did a lot for clients, and we talked about that with the excuse me. And, we collected a lot of photographs with the plant's permission. I used an educational program, and I would pass them on to the clients, and so they could use them and add to it. And, not that I really cared, but I use it as an educational tool. So that if I called something a standard, I wanted them to see that it was a standard. Or if something was a high choice, I wanted to see that it was a high choice. Collection on other trades, so we did a lot of Brahman work. So hump height's a big deal. Brahman cattle will always be identified in a packing point. But it'll be never, you can have an Angus, and a Hereford, or a Charlotte, or a Limousine, or even a Wagyu, and as long as you don't cut split between the 12th and the third rib and look at the ribeye, or the mark. Okay, they're all going to be lost cars, but as soon as you run a Brahman in there, or a half Brahman, you're going to know it, because it'll have a hump. Purebred Brahman will have a hump that's 10 to 12 inches. A half blood will probably run 4.5 to 5, or maybe 6. And even the one that has just a touch of Brahman, maybe a quarter blood, will still have a 4-inch crest. And that's certainly about 2 inches more than is needed to get it in the CAB. We already talked about some of these carcass problems, and of course, once in a while, somebody might want to collect carcass samples. You have to arrange with the plant, because you got to pay for them, and of course, they have to deal with a truly short one. So here's some problems. Delayed income, we talked about that. Not having really adequate contemporary, it doesn't do any good really, unless you're just interested in knowing how your cattle perform, to get carcass data on a single animal, or 10 single animals that aren't related. And so it's good to have a contemporary group whenever possible. As I said earlier, there's few university or extension feeding programs. You might need to find feed yards that will feed smaller. So as we move into these ranch raised programs, I think that's a good idea, by the way. And, where you're feeding your own cattle and merchandising your own cattle, you have an opportunity to do that. We already talked about variations in feeding programs. Timely harvest, that's a big deal. Because if you can't get cattle sold, they get fat. Now, the only person that hurts is you, because you're paying about $1.20 a day for every pound of gain that those animals have. They get to be fat, they're no longer gaining 3.5 or 4 pounds a day, but you're still paying $3 or $4 every day for those cattle to be there. You don't have to get to be yield grade 4s or 5s. We get to be have some significant discount. You need to know something about the marketing arrangement. So is it a forward contract? Is it live cattle? Is it on a carcass grade meal? Okay, so if you're feeding some great cattle, like I've got the picture up there, basically all bets are off until they're hanging on the rail. Okay, or if you're a new feeder and they've never fed your cattle and you really can't tell what they are, or if you do, maybe they're sort of a group of mixed cattle, they might be able to give you an idea. Well, we'll put them on the rail, we'll see how they go. But it won't be below this. Then, of course, if you've got a set of cattle that are really good, or they know they have some history of that breed, then you may have a completely different range. But you need to know that in the front. be able to get to the processing and be able to get, get that data collected. I think that's, to me, that's really, and the other thing I want to point out is when you're into the plan, or when whoever's in the plan, it's very, very important to abide by their rules. Okay, because you're a guest, and they're trying to follow HACCP procedures. They're going to be inspected by the veterinary services. It's not USDA that's in charge of whether or not you contaminate anything in that plant. Okay, it's veterinary services, and anybody in the plant, if you walk in without a hairnet on, or a beard net, or in your local town shoes, then you shut the plant down. Because that becomes a food safety issue. And so be very careful, be very courteous. Whenever possible, you want to always want to follow their rules. Okay? So ultrasound. I tell you what, Tommy and I have had a long relationship for many, many years, since about 1986. Tommy's in about 1990, no, right? And this guy's guru, he's my go-to guy, and always has. There have been lots of other Casey before I was here, or was here. There you go, Casey. Casey scanned for me, or Donnie Robinson scanned for me. Warren Health scanned for us. So, everybody's been really good, and it's a very useful tool. One of the best things about ultrasound, I'm gonna tell you right up front, is an animal doesn't have to be dead, right? You don't have to kill that animal. If it's really good, you're gonna have them around. So it's, as in terms of scanning for live cattle, it's well established, relatively inexpensive. Carcass data services, I think high starts at about $500. I told you I had about 10 per head, so if you have a load of 40, that's essentially $400, so we're not that far different. The ultrasound guidelines have been around. I stole that off the webpage there, Patrick. And adopted by most breed associations, if not all. Okay, the equipment for collecting and scanning and interpreting are standardized. And this is my opinion, this last one here, in selection, I think ultrasound results have wider acceptance in the beef industry than the ED does. Because the commercial cow man understands it, the commercial cow person, the commercial cow producer understands ultrasound, I think, better than EBDs, because I think they can see them. Okay, they can see them. You can see the printed EBD, but it's quite a bit different. So to me, those are the real pluses. This is what scan results come from the lab. AJ Knowles, the director of breeding recruitment from the Bronx Association, sent me scan results. This comes from the Cup Lab. And as it goes into digital beef, or whatever breed association is using it, they have to report what lab it comes from, because the format may be a little bit different. Okay, and as I learned 13 or maybe a little almost 2 years ago, is that once you upload those results to digital beef, you have to say okay. Okay, before final action goes in. So, and they'll actually check to see if there's any outliers. Maybe an animal is too young or too old, and you have to go back and sort of validate. So, there's checks and balances. It's not just data that's been created and automatically goes in. Okay, it takes one extra touch. This is give you an example. See, you can see up here, that's what you'd have to do. Okay, and it's not terribly rocket science, but it does give you a check and balance. And I think it's really important. We went through. I guess the first time that I was involved with ultrasound, as I said, with A&M was probably about 1988, and they were interpreting shoot site images. So the ultrasound technician that we had hired at that time at A&M that was going to promote the technology and talk about it, they would just say, well, it looks like it's about a 13.5 and an IMF of whatever it was, 3.9. And that sounds good. You say, well, just a 3.9, well, no, maybe it's a 4.2. I'm not saying that happened, but the point is to have all those results go through the central processing. That just puts it all on a more level playing field. So here's some challenges, and it's they're not so bad that they can't be overcome, and it's still back to our breeders, and it's not to the breeders that use ultrasound a lot. It's to the breeders that want to use ultrasound. And maybe it's the first time. We deal with lots of questions. You know, who does ultrasound in my state or in my area? What does it cost? What does it mean? What do I need to have? And so you can direct them to the website, but then you also need to be able to talk to them, visit with them. So, there's a lack of understanding of the requirements, what makes this thing work. Yeah, just like Carcass data, actual Carcass data, we can scan a single animal. What do you mean? You get an idea what that particular animal is. Is it useful? Can you put it into something? You might be able to make a selection decision at that point, but let's look at it. Get it adjusted. Is there still some confusion in the breeder interpretation of IMF? I think that's fair to say. I mean, there's confusion here. Right? What's the IMF for a small 0, barley score? Okay, much less if we get up well above 1199 or 1179. Timeliness of reporting, right? I think some are very good about doing it. I think some are a little bit slower. These guys and gals are busy. You travel enough down the road, you're going from this place to this place, and you're working at night making sure that information gets uploaded. Sometimes you can get a little bit behind, and I get behind. Shoot side interpretation, when I talk about that, similar issues as far as data collection. Now, it's not actual Carcass data. Okay? It can be used. I'm still not understanding, even after all these years, how do we bring that into our EPD calculation? Through genetic correlation between IMF marbling score, between low sound ribeye and actual ribeye area? Well, and so if I'm a little confused, I just like to see us try to do more Carcass data. We don't have to do all Carcass data. I told you, the beauty about ultrasound is that it's relatively inexpensive, it's pretty easy to use, right? And you can keep the animal around. But we do need to continue, particularly as selection progresses in some of these breeds to improve Carcass merit. We're going to have supply Carcass data to sort of tag along, to act as reference points, so that we can continue to utilize the technology. Okay, and so to me, that just sort of keeps us grounded. Carcass cameras, previous speaker already talked about this. These pictures are actually coming from SCX or San Cane, as it was in that picture right there. It's got to be about 20 years old. And it's a hood, and we put it on, they actually scan the tag, and it's a barcode that tells the kill number and the date and the Carcass weight, that goes into the machine. She takes a picture of it. It's a little bit different camera than it is now. That was an earlier version, and that really poor quality picture you see at the bottom is sort of what you see. And it'll do all kinds of measures for you. It'll do ribeye area and fat thickness in 3 different areas. It already has the Carcass weight. It assumes the standard can be held with the RFAD. It'll predict yield rate. It'll predict marbling score. It'll predict quality rate, and it'll predict a whole bunch of other stuff too. Just depends on what you want. At one time, they thought it would predict tendons based on color and the size of the ribeye and the fineness of the muscle fibers, but it didn't work out nearly as good. It was approved by USDA, a ribeye area and fat thickness in 2007, marbling score in 2013, and most of these sit right next to the grader. So I'm not sure what the grader does, except look at what they're doing and say, yep, that's a select 2 or that's a choice 3, whatever it happens to be. I'm too hard on them, I'm sorry. Fast and accurate. don't necessarily need to be there. They can do it at change speed. The change speed at this plant is about 1 carcass every 20 seconds. So it doesn't take, it works pretty well. I'm not sure how, if they can do it at 1 to 15 or not. It doesn't require some sort of plan like they to establish animal identity. And most plants will share their data. You have to ask them. You know, maybe a university, maybe a breed association, and certainly the owner. And remember that once those cattle are delivered to the plant, they're knocked in the head and go on the computer, they're not yours anymore. That data is really not yours, they're sort of doing you a favor. But most of the time, they will share that data. It may not be really clean, like in an Excel spreadsheet, it might look more like one of those CSV files, but nonetheless, you'll be able to interpret it, okay? And then the last speaker approached this, and I thought, and I appreciate her doing it. This is something I know that a lot of folks that are doing range raised beef will struggle with. How do I promote the quality of my product? And so the USDA came up with this remote pilot rating program. By the way, that is one of my features that I took to my cell phone. Okay, so I think that you can see that it's pretty decent quality, although it is pretty well blown up. What that requires is at least 8 megabyte or megapixel. You know, that's a standard feature of your children or your dog or your grandchildren or whatever. Not a really big picture. For the best, so you want to take 2 pictures of the ribeye, and you'll take 1 picture of the chine bone. So I don't have a picture of the chine bone, but on the carcass, right underneath that ribeye, where you see that tag, there are 3 buttons that are chine bones that are the upright spinous processes for the 9th, 10th, 11th rib. And what they want to make sure is at the very top of those buttons, there's less than 10% red. Because the more red they are, the higher the maturity is. So they have more than 10% red, that means at least 10% of them are bone, and they're over 30 months of age, or at least they're being maturity. And so if you look at that, if they are being maturity, that's fine. That just means that if they were going to grade select and they're being maturity, they're going to be standard. But if their choice, basically, they'll trade off maturity. But that's what they'll need too. They don't care which side, whether it's the left or the right side of the ribeye, or the left or right side of the triangle. But I will tell you, if you're interested in doing this, always take the best side. Because that's what we do when we collect carcass data. We'll always look at the best side. Okay? You upload you have to apply for this. They'll come to the plant, they'll inspect it, and that's not actually USDA that does that. That's the veterinary services to make sure that your plant's clean. This is for USDA plants that can do interstate business. For plants that are going to do state business, the state Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, probably have that. 4 to 8 weeks. And I tell you that what the cost is roughly about $3,000 to start. So the initial visit is about $1,500, and they'll do an annual audit to make sure that you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. That's another $1,500. And then what you'll do is they'll create you they'll have a website, and you'll have a login, you'll send your pictures to them, and a USDA grader will generally upload those pictures there, and USDA grader, generally within 24 hours, will return a quality grade and yield grade. They're saying about marbling score. So they'll basically give you a quality grade and yield grade. It's not cheap because it's $114 per interpretation. That's about what they pay the federal graders. That's not what a federal grader gets, otherwise I've been one for 40 years. Okay. But that pays for all the, they pay for all the infrastructure and everything else. So, there's plenty of money, put in there. But, it might take them a couple of minutes to look at. And if you have 40 or 50 or so, and by the way, you can only do 40 a week. Okay, so there's a maximum number that you can do. So it really is for a small plant. But But nonetheless, it's something to consider if you happen to be a small operator, a small processing plant. So, all breeds, I think, I used to I was with a breed that, was not really good for carcass, but they always talked about their maternal ability and their fertility, and that's fine. They were that. They had a lot of those kinds of attributes, but all breeds need to worry about carcass data, because I think we've got breeds, all breeds can get rid of some of those outliers that, as one of those speakers said in the last couple of days, when we use those in a cross-breeding program, we don't want to use breeds that actually drag us down too far on one frame. We want to use animals that drag us down too far on one frame. And so that's why I think it's important. We should have some emphasis on it to remove those undesirable outliers. As I said before, actual data is difficult and expensive to collect, but it's more accurate because it's a real thing. We can argue about that all we want. We can argue about whether we measure feed efficiency is, pound of feed per pound of gain, or pounds of gain per pound of feed. But that's just sort of my interpretation of it. Also, data is very economical to select, very useful to select, and we've used it a lot, and we need to continue to use it for breeding animals or as feeders. But I really think we need to, every now and then, kill it to make sure that it works, that it still works, because selection changes the population. Right. And finally, both can be used to increase selection response effectively, and I'll be used at the same time. I don't know why I said accordingly. It's been late at night when I put that together, but you can use them at the same time. With that, I'm gonna stop. Tom, if you got any questions, or comments, let me know.